Hammer, what's happening, man?
Oh, not a whole lot. I've been to Vegas enough times. Like I've actually been like in that area. And I think I stayed at the Hard Rock one time, or at least we visited the Hard Rock, and they had the outfit that Tupac was wearing that day, and then he went and changed,
Hmm.
and then left in a car, and then the whole situation happened. Blake Ellington is a big Tupac guy, and we were in Vegas one time, and I think we actually went to like it looks like a parking lot area. Like it's like one of the few underdeveloped areas right off the strip where Tupac was shot.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
Yes.
It is. It's right off the strip because when Suge flipped the car around, he was driving back. He was driving back to the strip.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's like off. Like I used to know all of the street names by.
Yeah, it's like right on the backside. It's not that far away from
Flamingo
everything.
and I forgot the other one.
That's that. Yeah, but I always think about Big when I pass the Peterson, like just in LA, like
I don't know where that's at. Like I never
Wilshire. Yeah, like it's.
passed it and said, "Oh, this is where it's at." I never.
Oh yeah, like I've stood on that corner. Like this is truck came out of here. This parking lot came over here, and yeah, I've played that one out. Um,
I took a electric scooter in Dallas. I rented a like an Uber scooter, and I drove to the grassy knoll.
mhm.
Yeah, so
Well, can I ask you? Did it feel weird when you got there?
yeah, it felt a little weird. I mean,
It like
just being there, but
like
it's like a busy intersection.
it very much is, and there's an X like the like I think they might have just removed it, but there's an X in the middle of the street where
Oh my!
the car
Yeah, and
was.
like you see the book depository, it's all like right there. Yeah, that and like I've been to Germany and like seen things in Germany that you don't want to see. Uh, yeah,
I've read and seen so many things on JFK. I remember when I got there to downtown Dallas, I kind of looked around, and when you piece it, because I wasn't with anybody, like I was trying to find it, and I looked up and saw the book depository, and then I figured out where I was, and there was just this. Oh, there's just kind of that weird feeling like I've seen this area so many times, and like now I'm standing in the middle of it, and you start looking around and piecing it all together. That's where the umbrella was, and that's where the smoke was, and that's where this was, and that was, and it's something.
yeah, it's different. It's different.
I love Dallas, though. I know Kenny hates Dallas.
I've never been to Dallas. I think I like the city of Dallas.
I think that's kind of
Yeah.
one of the cool things about like traveling around to NBA cities because I got to do that quite a bit for a few years, and you just like you're in cities that you're not going to be in a whole lot, so you end up doing different things. Going to
Mhm.
different areas. I know Jim Patrick from Sacramento Bee lived in Utah in Salt Lake City, and we were there to cover a Jazz game, and I met him for a beer, and then he drove me all around, drove me all the way up into the hills and everything. And as we were driving around, the Kings traded I want to say Trevor Ariza for Kent Bazemore. And then it was like, we got to get somewhere. So we drove really quick and started writing and confirming and all that stuff.
Yeah. Salt Lake City. That's a place that I'd probably just go for a Kings game.
You know, I wouldn't recommend that because the flight in. Well, no, it's not because of it's actually a great place to go cover a game because there's a Marriott that you walk out the door and the media entrance is across the street. So you just walk out of one place and into the next. And it's an interesting city, but it's really high as far as elevation. And in order to get in there, a plane it's a super sharp angle to get down to the airport,
Oh
and
my.
it's not a fun flight in. Like getting in there, it's a little sketch of all the places to fly into. Yeah, it's a steep decline to the airport.
Well, I guess I won't go to Salt Lake City to watch Kings game.
What's your favorite place to go to?
I don't know. Like I've been to the Garden. That was cool. Um, I love going to Portland. Portland's such a fun city. Like great food. Everywhere has great food, great beer. I'm a foodie, so that's a
Wait to
lot
go
of
to a game at the Nike Arena.
yeah. Well, yeah, we'll see what happens there. LA's okay. You stay pretty close to the arena typically in LA. And the stadium itself is pretty amazing. And then they're known because they have a soft serve machine, and everyone is always envious of the soft serve machine at Staples. So it's part of the meal package when you're there. You pay your $7 and you can have all kinds of stuff, but you can keep going back to the ice cream machine. Yeah, so I like New Orleans. New Orleans is fun. And I love going to San Antonio, like everything, because it reminds me of when I was a kid and we drove out and went to the Alamo, and so you stay in downtown San Antonio and everything is basically like the Riverwalk and everything is right
Riverwalk
there.
is pretty dope.
Yeah, and it's like the Alamo is right there, and it's just like a little tiny building, but it's still fun to go to.
So what makes the Riverwalk dope? I'm seriously asking. So is it like a long walk, or like what makes it such an attraction?
It's literally it's a river walk with restaurants, bars, places to shop. Like you can just walk along the river, walk up here. Oh, it's a Mexican restaurant right here. I'm gonna go into here. Oh, there's a bar right here. I'm gonna go into this one.
Is it like walking downtown, starting at Embassy Suites and going to Old Sac?
No. It's more like going to a rainforest cafe. That's what it's kind of like. It's kind of like almost like a Disney-esque river walk. Like the river, I'm sure, is a natural river, but they've put it right through the middle of this area. They've built up as like a really nice food district. So yeah, I mean, it's a little different.
I'll go to San Antonio to watch a game. I'll skip Salt Lake City.
Yeah, the stadium is like, I don't know. It's like if you were in downtown Sacramento and the stadium was out in like Del Paso Heights. It's like out in the middle of nowhere and there's nothing around it. And no, it's not super safe. Like you don't want to be outside the stadium a whole bunch. You want to get in a car and get back.
It's on Martin Luther King Drive.
Yeah. It's not a great place to wait for an Uber. It's not. But there's nothing else out there, so it's kind of like barren. I guess maybe a little bit like Arco 2 before everything grew up around it, where you would go and it's just kind of sitting there in the middle of nowhere.
Was Chet is Chet your first prospect profile on the Kings beat?
Yeah, that's the first one I've done this season. I dug, pretty deep into the film on Chet. Man, is he impressive. Like it's so hard. Like he truly is a one of one, right? That's what you get when you're trying to do like player comps. I'm sitting here shuffling through, and the thing you get caught up on is how skinny he is. But that's not really fair because there have been thin players before. Maybe not a 7-footer that's quite like this, but Poku, I guess, is close to it. But
KD had to be relatively close, didn't he? I know he wasn't this skinny, but Kevin Durant was pretty
really skinny.
Yeah, Durant's skinny, but like you don't want to compare him to Durant, and it's difficult too because you want to compare him a little bit to Porzingis, but Porzingis doesn't get down in a stance like him, and Porzingis isn't the shot blocker that he is, just a pure natural shot blocker. So I loved watching the footage of him, like watching him rotate, watching him, he's on a guy here, and that guy dishes to another guy. And he's got a wide open look, and all of a sudden Chet's there, and he's with a 7'6" wingspan. I mean, the kid can reach up and wrap his fingers around the rim from the ground. Yeah. So I mean, he's got to go up on his tiptoes, but it's definitely he's intriguing. Like if the Kings moved up to number 2 and gave up a future first, I would understand it because he could be a franchise changing big. Like I compared him like maybe the modern day Andrei Kirilenko. Kirilenko didn't have great handles, and he wasn't a great shooter. He had a mid-range jumper, but he wasn't a great three-point shooter. But that's where you kind of get the modern day. They stretch the floor out a bit. But he moves really well. He's fluid. He's absolutely incredible in transition. He's good at initiating the break. He's a really good rebounder. If you had him in Sabonis, you don't even need to try, and you're in the top 5 in the league in rebounding. So especially if you bring back a guy like Dante DiVincenzo, who's one of the best rebounding 2 guards in the league, But all of a sudden it doesn't matter if Harrison Barnes is averaging 7 rebounds a game. He can average 5.5, 6, and conserve his energy for something else. You're going to get a ton of rebounds.
What at Gonzaga, he essentially kind of played a stretch four, right, on the offensive end because Timmy was down low a lot of the times. Is that kind of what you saw? And if so, like what did how'd you like his offensive game in that situation? College is a little different. It's not as open as the NBA, but
Yeah, but I think what they did there is they used Drew Timmy as a true rim runner, and he ran the floor trying to get down into the post and get post position, and it allowed Chet to be the trailer. So he'd get the rebound. Either he initiates the break, which he can handle the ball fine and initiate the break without any problems at all. The Kings let everyone initiate the break, which I thought was crazy last year. I mean, we had Damian Jones and Chimezie Metu leading the break. I'm like, what is happening here? There's no kick it to a guard anymore like it used to be. Everyone in the whole gym is yelling, find your guard. That doesn't happen anymore. But he's a really, really confident shooter as a trail man in transition. And, we see that a little bit from Jokic, that guy, and we see it a lot from Jaren Jackson Jr. So I think he's got a lot of the skill set that Jaren Jackson Jr. has, except for he's a much better ball handler. He's not nearly as strong, but he's still a great shot blocker, and he's a really competent three-point shooter from the top. And I think it would make a lot of sense for the Kings.
Why doesn't it, like, how come we don't hear him more at number one? I feel like the season, maybe it started isn't the right word, but somewhere during the season, it was a lot of Chet at number one, Chet at number one, Chet at number one. And then at some point it seemed to shift to Jabari. How come Chet hasn't kind of regained that number one spot?
Just to be honest, like the NBA is a copycat league. And when you see a team like Memphis really take off and they're doing it with Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr., and this kid looks just like Jabari Smith Jr. looks just like Jaren Jackson. I think that's probably part of it, that you see an instant fit and you have no question about who he's going to be at all. I think that might be the question for Chet. He is a true one of one. He's a unicorn or Pegasus, like whatever you want to call him. Like, he is totally unique. And so you're confused about who he will actually become. You know that he'll be a really good defender and a really good shot blocker, and then he can stretch the floor. But again, his handles are nice. His ability to pass is nice. The fact that he's 7 foot tall with a 7'6" wingspan and can post up or be in the high post or be outside the 3-point line and pass from all of those angles. That's really nice because you can't stuff his pass. I mean, he's so incredibly tall and long. He needs some work, He needs to get stronger, that's for sure. I don't think he'll be able to hold on more than like maybe 15 pounds of weight until he's 26, 27. So like getting him up from 195 to like 210, that's going to be really tough. Yeah. And keeping that weight on is going to be tough. I mean, we're talking like that kid's going to be eating like 8,000 calories a day, like nonstop. Like they're going to be shoving food down his throat trying to get him heavier. But at the same time, like I like the skill set, and I don't want to take away his ability to move and to cover multiple positions. But I also know that at the NBA level, you got to be strong. And if your core isn't strong enough, we saw a little bit with Neemias Queta, where at the NBA level, these guys are bigger, faster, and stronger than anything you've ever seen at the college level. And so you really, really have to be so quick. And in order to be quick, you got to be strong. And so I'm hoping that that's not going to be a huge issue. But he plays hard, and he doesn't back down, and he doesn't get shoved around like people think he might. I mean, he went up against Duren, Jalen Duren, I think, who outweighed him by 55 pounds. Just swatted him again and again. Paolo Banchero got him a couple of times, like getting into his body and like running him over. But again, he outweighed him by 55 pounds. Like, you're not going to be facing that guy every night in the NBA. You're going to be facing some guys you got to chase.
Well, that's one of the things that I think about when I think about Chet in the NBA is I'd much rather him be this 4 who is, I don't want to say away from the basket, but I feel like where his slight frame comes into play is if he's trying to guard, I'm just throwing a center out there. If he's trying to guard DeMarcus Cousins in the post, DeMarcus will go right through him. Like, he doesn't have like that. Like, Chet may have the height to affect the shot, but he doesn't have the core strength or the strength to like keep DeMarcus off his spot and things of that nature. I like Chet a little bit more, say if he was guarding a Draymond Green, Draymond out there at the top of the key, or somebody that moves, because I think the length that he has with his arms and the ground he's able to cover, I think anybody trying to do something on the perimeter, that's more of a problem for them as opposed to him trying to guard somebody on the block.
Yeah, I think, like, look, you have Sabonis to defend the big, heavy guys, and then you still have Chet, who's an incredible weak side shot blocker. So he's really good at man on, but where the Kings really need somebody is a weak side shot blocker, and not everybody can do both. Not everybody's a good man on shot blocker. What I've seen from Chet is he's able to absorb a major blow from somebody and keep his hands upright. And so a lot of NBA players, they body into you, and if you fall back too much, then they take the next step and launch up through you and go dunk on you. What Chet does is he's able to absorb some of that contact, stay straight up, and then if you don't give that space, they can't load up to jump up and over you. And he's so long, it just never ends. That's the problem. If you're tight against him, you're not getting a clean shot at all. I mean, he's so good in that space at being close to people and being straight up and going up and blocking shots. I mean, he averaged 3.7 blocks in like 26.9 minutes per game. That's just crazy. I mean, it's well over 5 blocks per game, per 36. And I think he'll be a guy who leads the league in shot blocking. There's a very good chance of that. His shot blocking ability should translate. It's natural. It's partially because of its length, but it's also guys who block shots. It's a unique skill that's almost impossible to teach. Either you're a shot blocker or you're not. And you guys have played pickup games all over the place. You go up against a guy and you're like, man, you're like 5'7". How in the world did you just block my shot? And some guys just are natural shot blockers, and that's where I would put Chet.
Real quick, Nate. The other question I would have now, because I was listening to King's Beat and we talk about fit, and, are you willing, in some of these cases, when you talk about who the Kings may take, are you willing to wait, a year or two for them to really become who they're going to become? Is Chet fall in that category? Or is he somebody, night one, opening night, he's your starter. Obviously, he's going to get better over time, but you're expecting 15-8 for the season from Chet Holmgren.
I don't know about 15. I'm not convinced that he's going to be a high-level scorer at the NBA level. I think he can be a solid scorer, but 15 is a little tough in year one. He is going to be a starter on day one for whatever team he goes to. Just the skill set, the IQ, everything is there. I mean, you're going to want him to get stronger. You're going to have some time between the draft and, training camp, which, the start of the season isn't until, third week of October. So you're looking at, all of July, all of August, all of September to at least try to stack some weight on him. But I think he's a starter regardless of where he goes on night one. And I think he's an improvement on night one. And then from there, you wait to see who he becomes. It will take 2 or 3 years, but, again, like Paolo Banchero, Jabari Smith, Jaden Ivey, like those guys are all going to start on night one. Most of them are going to start. There's a possibility that Ivy might need a little time.
Because I got a question if you think they're all going to start.
Yeah.
About Jaden Ivey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If the Kings wind up at 4, if the Kings wind up staying at 4, I should say they're at 4 now. If there's no trade and they draft Jaden Ivey, You think he's starting night one?
I think there's a good chance. Maybe not, because I mean, look, the Kings they didn't start Marvin Bagley. They didn't start Tyrese Halliburton in his rookie season. They didn't start Davion Mitchell in his rookie season. So there's a possibility that he needs to be taken along a little bit slower, but he's still going to play 24 minutes a night. Like, he's still going to be in closing lineups sometimes. He's going to be in the game a lot. I mean, you're talking about an elite athlete that just creates mismatches all over the place. So yeah, and to like finish up with Chet, when it comes to the scoring side, he's going to be able to hit the trailer three. He's going to be able to hit the corner three. He shoots something like it's absolutely ridiculous, like 84% in the circle. Like, you can't stop him in the circle. I mean, he didn't get blocked on a dunk at all throughout his entire freshman season. He's a guy that if you can get him to the post, like, he's gonna get a bunch of easy baskets. So he's gonna get those on offensive rebounds. He's gonna get those on cuts off of Sabonis. So there is potential he can do a little bit of pick and roll. Although again, he's not a great screen setter because he's so rail thin. He does need to improve in that section. But I could see easily, I guess 14, 15 could be where he starts. But I don't think he's more of like maybe a 17, 18 point per game guy, but a lockdown defender. And, his real impact is going to come on the defensive end and as a passer.
Does he move well? Like you could see him move, especially in transition. When he has the ball in his hands, for his size, it's pretty noticeable. He can move with the ball in his hands.
Oh, yeah.
Offense. Does he move around really well as like a guard is trying to run an offense?
I don't know if I would say a guard trying to run an offense, but he certainly can grab a rebound or block a shot, come down with it, and take off running and move like a guard through guards, like up and down the court. I mean, we saw it with Sabonis make some incredible moves. Chet has a very nice swivel in the hips, like for a guy that big.
The hips, there they are.
Yeah. I mean, he does. He's got a big swivel, and like he's not a stiff. That's what you And the other thing he does is when he is handling the ball, he gets down in a stance. He's not upright, and a lot of guys that size, when they are going out on the break, they're full 7 foot tall. He shrinks down, which is, for me, that's really good to see that he has a knee bend. He has the ability to get out and run.
Yeah. I'm anxious to see him in the league, man. And if the Kings were to make a move up to get Chet, or in some different universe, if he fell to him, I'd be excited to see him. I really would be excited to see him, because I still want to look at more game film and dive a little bit more into that. But I know just kind of some of the things I've seen interviews and about, like, Chet Holmgren, the person, man, I don't know what I was thinking he was going to be, but he wasn't like I thought he would be at all, right? Like, he'll get after it. He'll get after it. He's not going to be intimidated. He's not going to be punked. And I love that about him. That's something where I would get confidence in him being on this team if the Kings were able to make that move.
Yeah, it's what makes him so hard to, like, put a label on. You just, there are certain things you don't know. I think it's why he's not going number one, most likely. I mean, everything I hear is Orlando's taking Jabari number one. But when you look at him move, and like the low end, maybe he's Mo Bamba with handles. And I put John Henson was the other guy, like what John Henson should have been, like a 3-point shooting, long shot blocker. But again, he's got handles. He's got all kinds of other skills that even at Gonzaga he wasn't able to show. And so I'm intrigued to see where he goes and how he develops as a player. There is, always the concern that he never gains weight, that he does get shoved around the NBA level, that he can't get stronger, that he becomes injury prone because he's so incredibly thin. All of those things are intriguing. There's an interesting name. Someone mentioned in the chatty house, Jonathan Bender, again, who had major knee issues and was rail thin. But he's certainly worth a gamble because he comes into the NBA with an elite skill set, and that skill set is on the defensive end, which you rarely see out of a player of this size. And his ability to defend multiple positions, his ability to block shots, like all those things, they all stand out. And he is a fiery guy. I think he doesn't get shoved around, and that's something that you would be worried about because of his weight.
All right.
Is his biggest weakness his frame?
Oh yeah, I think if he weighed even what Evan Mobley weighed, which was, I think he came into the combine at like 210 last year. Even if he came in at 210, I think not only is he a number one pick overall, but you're talking about like what's his ceiling? Is it generational talent type guy? Like again, it's really hard to do comps. Like you start to look at him, you're like, man, could he be Karl Anthony Towns? Maybe not. Maybe not on the offensive end. But then again, we talked about Donovan Mitchell a bunch on Wednesday. Donovan Mitchell came into the league as a 12-point per game guy at college, and no one thought he was just a defensive player. And so you overlooked a lot of his offensive potential. I think we're overlooking a lot of Chet's offensive potential. It's going to be unique. But, if you can teach him a fadeaway, if you can teach him the Dirk floater or the Dirk fallaway in the lane, why not? He's so incredibly skilled. There's no reason why he can't learn those things. It's going to be a process, though.
So here's the other thing about that, though, James, is not as much as the weight. I think if he would, what is he, like 7'3"?
No, Chet's 7 foot.
He's 7 foot? Okay. If he was 6'10", I think we'd look at Chet a little different. I think once you get above 6'11", you get to 7 foot, 7'1", 7'2", now you're worrying about feet. Now you're worrying about knees, backs, all this other stuff, because traditionally those guys don't hold up. And for me personally, like I feel like he's a kid. Like he put on weight. The thing that would give me pause is the height. And is he going to have any problems that are unforeseen?
Yeah, again, like Porzingis' body is not held up at all. He had the catastrophic knee.
None of them really do. The 7-footers, they don't really hold up.
Yeah, there are guys. It's tough because if we count guys that are 6'10", 6'11", there are guys that play in the league forever that are that size.
There's something about the 7 foot.
That's what I'm saying. If he was 6'10", 6'11", we'd be good. Once you get to 7'1", it's like, I don't know.
So you're wishing he would have worn flip-flops at his height. Yeah, I'm not sure. Like, again, Chet didn't participate in the combine. Well, he did in the interviews and all that stuff, but he didn't go through the height and the weight and the measurement stuff. And like, we have no idea what his vertical is. Like, I've seen him get 2 feet above the rim without any question. But 2 feet above the rim, that's 24-inch vert. That's how tall he is. So, like, that's crazy, right? But we have no idea really what his vert is. And the fact is, I think that maybe that he is more ground-based is actually a good thing when it comes to injuries. The guys who are ground-based typically last longer than the high flyers, although Vince Carter, throws that out the window. But like, if he's in the right program, in the right situation, playing with the right people that can help him get better, then he has every opportunity to be at least a star level, an all NBA type defender, and with the potential to be a multi-time All-Star with his ability to do some things on the offensive end and as a rebounder, because he's going to be a good defender.
A couple other things we want to talk to you about, James. I want to come back. We'll ask you about a couple of topics we were discussing earlier. One, we saw role players shine last night for the Boston Celtics, but how do you judge role players if you don't have the elite players on your squad? So we'll talk about that. And how do we fill out this role players? All we've heard since the end of the regular season, team needs shooters, team needs shooters, team needs shooters. How are the Sacramento Kings going to do that? We'll talk with James Ham about that when D'Lo and KC return here on Sacramento's #1 sports station, ESPN 1320. Clear. It's like bite number 5 on my lip.
You've hung in there, though. You've hung in there.
I don't know why. Like, I don't know if, like, do I not speak normally? I don't know what it is.
Wait.
It's one of those things.
You bit yourself and then you keep biting it?
I keep biting it over and over. It's like the 4th or 5th time on the show I've done it.
Yeah, once you get one of those sores, like you keep doing it. Yeah. Cranberry, grape juice, anything high acidic, it'll clear it up super quick.
McQueen with it, that'll do it.
Yep, there you go.
On the head hammer, that'll work.
Yeah, just sit there and let it sit on it for a minute. Kills it every time. Yeah, see, again, pragmatic pessimist brings up Svitishvili, which was a complete bust at the NBA level, Nikolai Svitishvili, and then ended up being really good in Europe and almost made a return to the NBA a few years ago. I guess that's what we're looking at with Chet. But
you know what, James, the thing about that is, and this is what I keep trying to tell people, they just don't want to listen to me. There are examples for and against every prospect that you put out there. So,
heck yeah.
You know, like you can say that you can bring up the worst case scenario and then 5 people bring out the best case scenario. Like you're not going to put a player out there and be like, well, what about? I mean, you know what? You're right. We shouldn't take them. Like it's not going to happen because it's the draft. Like you get guys that are comparable that worked out, guys that are comparable that didn't work out at all. They have no weight on what's going to happen with Chet or any of these other prospects.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy because, like, again, if I'm doing true comps and I look at Jaren Jackson Jr. and the fact that he shoots the top of the key 3 ball all the time and that he's a great shot blocker, then I start to compare him and Chet actually line up as well as Jabari. But the fact that he can put the ball on the floor and is a better ball handler than Jaren Jackson, there's no question there. The question is if he's strong enough, if he can actually hold his own and do some of the things that we see Jaren Jackson do. I like his fit with just about anybody. And again, I think with Sabonis, he just makes a ton of sense. Sabonis will handle the big boys, but there's going to be times too where you put Chet in the pick and roll because he's just incredible in the pick and roll. He gets down. He can defend both players in the pick and roll because of his length. You can't go over the top of him because, again, 3-point shooters, they freak out when he runs at them because he's got a 7'6" wingspan flying up in the air up at you. And he's not even a good closeout guy yet. He will be, but, he deters your shot because he's so long. And you see him block threes on occasion. Yeah, I don't know. He's intriguing.
You guys remember that one draft when Jalen Rose went way out of his way not to compare a black guy to a black guy or a white guy to a white guy? So just all these random. He's like, yeah, Chris Dunn. He reminds me of Doug Collins, to be honest with you. Calm down, Jalen.
It's funny. We're talking about Chet because I wrote a pro player profile on Chet today.
They didn't pay attention to that.
No, that's okay. I get that people, Theo Ratliff, Ratliff is somebody that I actually looked at. And again, the only reason we're talking about Chet like this and diving deep into him is because I wrote the profile on him today. We can go through all of these players and we'll go through profiles. And looking at Chet, again, it's really hard to put Chet. There's people that I'm missing. Because, again, he's so skinny.
Hang on, we're coming back.
Go
D'Lo and KC brought to you by McQueen and the Violet Fog, the smoothest gin in the world, handcrafted in Brazil. Pouring my first glass as prescribed by Dr. James Ham, coming up here in about 28 minutes. At least that's what I heard. He said, get you a glass of McQueen. That'll fix everything. Cranberry juice in there. Something. I don't know. I got
just a splash.
Just throwing it in there.
I'll become the Sacramento Splash.
Just realized James is rocking his Say Ferris shirt. So I'm all here. I'm all for it. I'm all for the save Ferris. If you want more on Chet Holmgren, head over to thekingsbeat.com. Hammer game 1 of the NBA Finals in the books last night, and I think I had a Kenny Caraway moment yesterday.
Oh, okay. Now we're getting busy. All right, let's go.
Kenny would regularly get agitated watching the Miami Heat. Guys like our very own Gabe Vincent out there doing the work that he was doing for them, and they're in the Eastern Conference Finals, and here we're talking about how we've got to get so much more talent to surround De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis with. And I think I had a similar moment last night where I was looking at the massive contribution that Derek White made, not only last night, but the contributions that Derek White has made for this Boston Celtics team throughout the year. And we had some conversations leading into game 1 of the NBA Finals talking about role players and bench players and, you know, the non-stars and how they can be a factor in this and who has the better group. And I realized that, you're talking about a team, the Warriors, a dynasty. You're talking about, this version of the Boston Celtics, which despite this being their first NBA Finals appearance, they've been very good for a long time. It's like, how do you measure a Derek White in Boston or even a Jordan Poole in Golden State versus a Terrence Davis in Sacramento or whoever a role player is here in Sacramento? Like, how do you measure, those role players on a team like Sacramento when you don't have obvious top 10, top 5 players in the league on your team?
Yeah, to be honest with you, it's kind of like this last season in a nutshell. You walked into the season thinking that they had bolstered their role players, right? The Kings added Alex Len. At the trade deadline, they had brought in Terrence Davis, Mo Harkless. Who's the other one at the trade deadline they came up with? Anyway, they had improved their role players, right? We get into the season, and you quickly learned that your core wasn't good enough to support the role players that you had. And that's just flat out what it becomes. Like, I would like to tell you that the Kings had, that the role players let them down. There are plenty of times where role players have let the Kings down. There are plenty of free agents who have taken the money in Sacramento and then not worked out at all. But when it really came down to it this year, I thought the additions on paper, they made sense for this team. And then you learned very quickly that if De'Aaron Fox isn't De'Aaron Fox in the last month of the season, he's De'Aaron Fox in the first month of this season. This team just flat out isn't talented enough. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter whether Mo Harkless is hitting his shots or not. Mo Harkless hitting his 3-point shot should be the least of your worries in an NBA game. But when you've got him and you've got Chimezie Metu, and all of a sudden they're not even defending those guys because they're not hitting their shots, but also you're just standard guys. You're Harrison Barnes. You're again, Buddy Hield when he was there. I think the one guy who played above and beyond was Tyrese Halliburton, but even still, he wasn't as consistent as people think. And then you look at what he went on to do in Indiana, and it's like, okay, every night he's putting up 20 and 10. When Fox and him weren't on the court together, sure, he put up a bunch of, 20 and 10s, and he was incredible. But overall, I think you learned that the Kings core just could not sustain with the role players that they had. And so you need better role players for sure, but you need better stars. You need better 1 through 5. And that's a big time issue. And I think they got better when they made the Sabonis deal, but you're still 2 or 3 guys away. We've talked about this so many times, how if you could get a legit number 1 that pushes Fox to number 2 and Sabonis to number 3, this team has a chance to be really good. If you can get a number 2 that pushes Sabonis down to number 3, and now you got Sabonis and Barnes as your 3rd and 4th best player in your starting lineup, you can be really good. But when you don't have that, it's really hard to succeed. And so that's why I think we've heard so much about the Kings are willing to move the 4th pick, but they want gold. Like, they want a player that changes sort of the entire calculus, the mechanics of their team, and pushes guys into more natural positions of who they should be as players. So again, if you've got Harrison Barnes as your 4th best player and Sabonis as your 3rd best player, and one of them has an off night, that's okay. They can have an off night. But as it's built now, Harrison Barnes decides to not show up. you're done. You have no shot of winning. And it's something that I think, again, the Terrence Davises of the world can help you, but they can't save you. You have to have the base that's strong enough to withhold it. And we could argue all day about like whether Miami had the base. That's why they're not all the way at the finals, because their stars were good, but not all of them. Again, like Kyle Lowry completely fell apart in the playoffs, and Bam was
Even
effective,
Bam
but
was in and out. Yeah.
yeah, and Bam, realistically, what does Bam look like now? He looks like your third best player, not or maybe even your fourth best, like offensive option, not certainly your second. If he's your second, you're in trouble. So that's where I think the Kings really have to find that next person, that guy who can that can really fit in and push everyone to their proper spaces.
And that would be great. I guess the only thing that I get caught up on, and I think we're all talking about the same thing for the most part, is say you do get a guy that's better than Fox, and you push Fox down to 2, Sabonis 3, Harrison, if he's still here, 4. So for them to be a playoff team, they need 4 guys in the starting lineup that average like 17 to 25 points a game at one point in their career. Like that, I think to me, that's a little excessive, because when you talk about getting somebody better than Fox, you're adding a guy that's probably going to average or has the capability of averaging like 25 a night. Fox has averaged 25 a night. Sabonis is at 20. Harrison is at 15, 16, 17 at some point in his career. You need all that to get to the 6th seed? Like that should be like, all right, we're talking about a contender type role, which would be great. Like I'd love that too. But if you don't have that guy that you bring in that is averaging 25 a night, like it shouldn't be like, well, we just shouldn't. How are we going to get into the top 10? The West is so strong. Like it shouldn't be that way. Like they have enough with the people that are around them right now where they should be better. It's unacceptable for them not to be better next year.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with pragmatic pessimist once again here in the chatty house, and I'm just gonna tell you that if you're a good team, Fox doesn't have to average 25 a night,
and that's fine. But somebody does.
No, you can have a bunch of guys averaging 20, 22, 18, 20,
I don't
22.
think that's realistic.
What, to have multiple 18 to 20 point scorers?
Like what playoff team I think you're talking like top 6 in each conference, who doesn't have a primary scorer?
No, I mean you can have a primary scorer. I'm not saying that, but you don't have to have somebody who's scoring more than De'Aaron Fox, or like if De'Aaron Fox, again, you look at where the Celtics are. Like their 2 stars are averaging like 27, 29, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's really good. And Fox can be there. He can be doing that as well, but you almost need another one of those guys in order if Fox is your number 1. And there's also a possibility where if Fox is averaging 21, 22, you're actually a much better team, especially if his assist rate goes up higher and he's looking at more like 8 to 9 assists a game, 10 assists a game. I think that's where you can improve. I think the discussion probably, it should hinge on the types of trades that you would pull off. So we talk about all this, and like if you brought in John Collins, that's where, like, I really like John Collins, and I've like pushed for that for a long time. Mm-hmm. But if you bring in John Collins is number 3. He doesn't push Fox or Sabonis anywhere. What he might do is he might push Harrison Barnes down. But again, you're really just and if you have to give up Harrison Barnes to do it, you're just swapping out that level of player. Right. Maybe Collins has a little bit higher ceiling as a scorer. Maybe he's going to get you more rebounds. He's more of the power forward version of Harrison Barnes. But that's where I think the Kings have to really be cautious with this number 4 pick, because if there's potential for that guy to be a legit number 2 or legit number 1, or even in Chet's case where he's a legit number 3 down the road, but his defensive acumen changes the entire look of your team like Draymond does, you can have your number 3 be like Draymond, where he's the biggest piece on your team that completely changes complexity on the defensive end, He's able to pass the ball. He's able to do all these other things. He doesn't have to be a 20-point per game scorer. So that's where it's complicated, right? You can put a team with 4 20-point scorers and not be any good. If you don't play defense, you're not going to be any.
We've done that before. Oh, it wasn't 4. I think it was 3. We had 3 point scorers and we stunk.
Yeah.
3
20
I was on the team. I was one of the 20.
You were one of them.
What was your number? What number did you have?
0.
Yeah.
0. My minutes and my points per game.
That's a baller's number right there. 0. That's a baller's number.
0.0. I was the rare 0.0. Yeah, Dame is 0. Dame is actually, he's not even number 0. He's letter O.
Yeah, it stands for O. Yeah. Yeah. No, I got you.
Is there a guy who could be that? Could Ivy be that? We've been talking for 2 days about Jaden Ivey. Well, we didn't today, but we talked a lot about him yesterday. Could Jaden Ivey be that number 2 guy, be the number 3 guy, be the number 1 guy?
Yeah, I think he projects as probably a number 2. That's what he projects long term. But I can tell you, Paolo Banchero, he probably projects as either a 1 or a 2. But does that matter? Again, are you getting all of everything wrapped up in one package? He might be the one guy. Well, I'd say Ivy's a rough fit as well. But at number 4, you either have to draft whoever falls to you there of the 4 guys, or you got to trade him for an all-star. I mean, those are your only 2 options, in my opinion, at this point.
We probably don't know is available.
Yeah. And I'll say this too, we've talked about this a bunch, but when it comes to Ivy, we're going to focus on him so much because as of right now, he's a presumptive number 4 overall prospect in this draft. I don't think there's anyone that's even close to him at number 4. After it is clearly number 1 and number 2 are Jabari and Chet. Number 3 is Paolo Banchero. Now that doesn't mean that they're going to go 1, 2, 3. And number 4 is Jaden Ivey. And I honestly don't believe that there's, after doing so much film watching and everything else, there's no one else that I would feel comfortable gambling on over one of these 2 guys, or one of these 4 guys. And if you're at number 5, you're in a totally different position. You have 7 different guys you can look at. But when you're at number 4, it's very specific. There are 4 really, really good players that are top end talents sitting there, and you got to wonder if, which guy you're going to end up with, which guy is going to fall to you.
Yeah. And I do feel like they're in a great position, like I continue to say, to get a really good ball player at 4. If they keep the pick and they draft it, they're gonna get a really good guy. I think there's a good guy. I think Ivy is on the tier with I think he's on the tier with Sharp and Keegan Murray. I don't think he's above those guys simply because like I said, some of the things that I watched the other day that I really like, but the concerning thing, and Rory in the chat brings it up right now, Jaden Ivey projects to be a 1-level scorer right now. Can he get better at a bunch of stuff? Absolutely. He can work on his mid-range. He can work on his shot off the bounce. We don't know necessarily how his catch and shoot is, but I think he's got concerns just like Keegan, just like Sharp, just like Matherin, those guys. I'm a little perplexed by the thought that Ivy is now on the same level as those top 3, because I don't know if he's necessarily there. I think he's still good, obviously, because I like Sharp and I like Murray, but I don't know if he's on the same level as those top 3.
Oh, I'm not telling you he's on the same level. I'm telling you that he's the next tier, and he's in a tier by himself. And we can talk about him being a 1-level scorer, which again is at the rim, right? That's what I would assume that someone's saying. He shot 35.8% from 3. And if you go back and look, he's a 36.4 up until his final 2 games. And if you look at Keegan Murray, he's a 37% 3-point shooter until he went 8 of 10 in his conference tournament right before the big tournament. And he jumped way up as far as percentages. That's the trouble with college. Number 1, it's not just that there's only 30 games, so the sample size is small, 32 games for these guys. It's that it's a 40-minute clock that's running, and there's just not the sheer volume of minutes or the sheer volume of shots. So it is much easier to see spikes in their shooting. I think Ivy shot like 44% in the first 12 games of the season from three. So we're not looking at a guy who can't shoot at all. We are looking at a guy that needs a mid-range game, but some of the reason why he might not shoot in the mid-range, because that's what it was. It wasn't that he missed every shot in the mid-range. It's that he didn't shoot that many, and the ones that he did shoot didn't go down at a high clip. But it could just be the fact that that's the way that their team was built. It's that they didn't allow for him to shoot a bunch of mid-range jumpers, and then he might have a bunch of mid-range game. But the explosiveness, the ability to get whatever Jaden Ivey is today, he won't even be near, like, you won't even be able to really like recognize him 2-3 years from now. That's why you draft him number 4. It's about the potential, and I don't see a way that, I mean, he could not make it. He could not be a great NBA player. But like, you have to, when you're drafting a number 4, you have to draft potential.
Man, that's frustrating to think. I'm trying to remember Ja's rookie year, because I think Ja's a constant use comp, and I get the explosiveness. I think everyone's doing it because of his hair. His hair is exactly the same, so I think they're calling the Jaden Ivey Ja Morant comp the same. But
because he's not the ball handler. He's not the distributor that Ja is. But I get what you're saying.
Well, what was Ja his rookie year? And is that like that? Because I wonder if the question for Kings fans is, what Ja was his rookie year, could you live with a version of that next year?
Of course, but you're not even going to get that, because you're dealing with a player who's going to play off the ball primarily in his rookie season. That's kind of what you're going to look at. And, I think Ja as a freshman was 12.7 points, 6.3 assists, 6.5 rebounds. And as a sophomore, but again, we're looking at Murray State, 24.5 points, 10 assists, 5.7 rebounds. You almost have to go back to that. Like, what was he as a college player? And I think a lot of these players, I've talked to you guys about this a bunch of times, how I think that this group of players and the group that's going to come after them for the next couple of years, they're going to be impacted. Their development is going to be impacted by the COVID situation, by the fact that there weren't the same volume of AAU games and everything else. That's just a problem. These guys are not coming into the league with the same level of, it's just sheer volume of games. That's it comes down to, like, they don't have the experience that the group before them had. It's because they lost their sophomore and junior year of high school, all of those games that they would have played. I mean, again, my son played like coming into high school, he played like 400 games of soccer. I mean, that's crazy. So if you have a kid who shows up who is a rec player and wants to join a comp team at age 13 or 14, and he's going up against players who not only have practiced 3 times a week for the last 6 years for 2 hours of practice, but they play more games in 2 weeks than you have in your entire rec season for years. There's no way to catch up. So again, a lot of these guys, they're going to need time. They're going to need time to develop, and even their bodies, but also, like, we're looking at a bunch of 20-year-olds, which is totally different than most drafts. Chet is almost 20. Jaden Ivey is a sophomore. He's almost 20. Keegan Murray's almost 22 and is sophomore. Like, this is a very, very different draft, and it's for a lot of reasons, but a lot of it is pandemic. And to me, the draft, I'll keep saying this, from 5 to 10, I almost guarantee there will be more quality players from 11 to 20 than there are from 5 to 10. You're shooting, it's darts at this point. There are going to be really good players from 11 to 20 that are much better than the players that you get, some of the players that you get from 5 to 10.
I heard you say that on the Kings beat. I disagreed. I think you're selling short these guys after 5. Like, these cats can play.
But is there, maybe there's something to be said too for the level of pressure that's on those guys that's at 5, 6, and 7 versus kind of the more maybe looser approach of the general managers in those later rounds. Two, they're also going to better teams. So perhaps one, you have more time to develop them, be more patient with them. And when they do play, they look better.
No, I agree. But again, we're looking at like a guy like AJ Griffin. Like he's in the mix between 5 and 10. He averaged 10 points a game. He shot the 3-ball well, didn't defend at all. Everyone calls him a 3 and D, didn't defend at all. He has this monstrous vertical that everyone, mystical vertical, doesn't use a vertical at all. He literally averaged 10 points a game. And Dyson Daniels, guy who's sliding up. Again, like his G League stats, everything he did, he cannot shoot at all. And we're seeing him slide up into the top. Shaden Sharp has not played at all. And not only that, he didn't even want to practice at Kentucky. Everyone's like, what in the world is the allure of this guy other than some mixtapes that we can see from high school and a prospect workout where a one on none? Like, we don't have anything to judge him by at all. So, like, again, like Matherin, I know Matherin's a baller. I would take him at number 5. That's in this draft. I mean, I guess that's why you have Keegan Murray in the discussion for 5, 6, 7. In a normal draft, I don't buy it. A normal draft, he's 10 through 16, 18.
Yes, I'm watching Keegan Murray wrong. I think he's a good ball player.
He's not a bad ball player. He's going to be in the league for a long time as an NBA starter. I totally agree. He's not a game changer. His upside, maybe Harrison Barnes.
Well, where was Harrison drafted?
7. Yeah, but I would even say I'd even say at that point he had higher upside.
You're a harsh draft critic.
I am, but like again, like you want to compare him to Tobias Harris? Tobias Harris is the 19th pick in the draft. Like that, like you want to compare him to Sadiq Bey? What 16th pick in the draft? Like in a normal,
Harris, like nobody wants to touch him. Everybody thinks he's an overachiever. Like Tobias Harris is not like I think he's a good ball player, but people are like, oh my gosh, like I don't want to touch him. He makes too much money. He's not.
Oh no, that's the only reason.
He's
it's
not
the money.
All the money, all this. He's bounced around. He's been on his 4th team now.
Yeah, but I mean, he's a really good player who gets you 20 and 8, 20 and 7.
And he's the same.
That's my point, though. Like the guys like what we're talking about, Keegan Murray. I don't see his upside as 24.5 points a game like he did at college, and I don't see him averaging 8.5 or 9 rebounds a game at the pro level. I don't see him being a lockdown defender. Like, I watched the tape a bunch. He's not going to average 1.9 blocks a game. I guarantee you that. So
maybe I could make the argument for that for Jaden Ivey.
To be all right. Nobody argue anything. I'm done with all of this. I'm going to go for the drink because